Press.
Okay, we're up to Daf Nun Amid Beis. We're at the very bottom of the Amid. The Mishnah had said that hemseis ubesakoises, which are parts, different stomachs of the cow, if they're punctured through and through, they have two linings. If it's punctured through and through, then it's treif. Taner Rabbanan machat shenimsas ba'oiv besakoises. If there's a needle that's found embedded in the walls of one of these stomachs, but it was only sticking through one of the sides, meaning it didn't go through and through. It's sticking in one wall, but it's not through and through. So mitzad echad kshera, then it's kosher because it didn't penetrate through. But mishnei tzadim, but if the needle is through and through, then it's treif. Now, unlike normally where you just have a hole, if there's a hole, there's a hole. But over here, because it's a needle, the Gemara is going to explain, we can identify whether the needle it punctured through and through, but it's possible that it was punctured after the animal died. And there's a way to identify that. If there's blood on the needle, that means that the puncture happened while the animal was alive. If there's no blood on the needle, that's indicative that the puncture happened post-death and it's not treifa. Now, normally you can't do this because when it's a hole, you can't just tell. But when it's a needle, you can actually look at the needle. So says the Gemara, nimtza lea kairadam. If there's a spot of blood on the needle, then be a duashafnei shchita. Then it's known that the animal was punctured before the animal died. The needle went through when the animal's still alive, so it's treifa. But if there's no blood on the needle, be a duashlachar shchita. That means that the puncture happened post-death and it's not a shchita. Now, let's say there's a hole through and through, so the animal's a treifa. The question is, can I get my money back? I bought the cow from a person, and it's a treifa now. Can I ask for my money back? So here's the halacha. Higel piyamak. If there's a scab covering up the hole, now it's still treif, but scabs take 3 days to form, which means that if I bought the animal today, I bought it from a sheikh today, that means that the treifa existed within 3 days, because it takes at least 3 days to form it. So that means that it happened 3 days prior. If it happened 3 days prior, that means that I can get my money back. It's a mekach tos. But loy higel piyamaka. But let's say there's no scab, and it's just a treifa. So I ask for my money back. The guy says, nah, it just happened just now. I said it happened before I bought it. So you know what the halacha is? The burden of proof is on me because I'm trying to get money from him. I'm not going to be able to. Now the Gemara speaks out. I told you that even if it's punctured through and through, you're supposed to check the needle for blood. Why is it that normally we don't check for blood? Normally we just say if it's a hole, it's treif. So Maishna Mikol Nukuvid Alma Dafagav Delekadam Tarif Mar. Why is it that normally when there's a puncture we don't say look for blood residue, we just say a puncture is a puncture? So Gemara speaks out, like I said before. Hasam Leka Midi Misach. Over there's nothing for the blood to stay on. A puncture is just a hole, so where would the blood be? But over here we deal with a needle. Even the ikamacha, because there's a needle. Yes, the kairin shchita u'misar havisarich. If the taka happened while the animal was still alive, there would be blood on the needle. Amalei Rav Safar Abaye said to Abaye, it's the following story. We said before that if the needle is punctured only through one side, it didn't go through the skin fully, it went through one of the flaps, but not fully, then it's not treif. So the Gemara says, Chazi mar haitzum rabban dasim arav. Rav Safar said to Abaye, there's a Rav who's coming to town from Eretz Yisrael, Rav Avir Shmani, and that Rav, he said his name is Rav Avira. So V'amar, and this Rav Avira said, Ma'iso ba lefnei Rabbi, that I was by Rabbi, Macha shenimsas beis hakoises, mitzad echad, that a needle only went through one other side, only one side, the inside of it, it didn't go through and through. V'tarfei, and Rabbi said it's treif. Now this is a chiddush, because we just got finished saying that's not true. So Abaye tried to figure out what was the story. So Shalach Le, Rav Abaye sent a message to try to get Rav Avir to come. Rav Avir refused. Doesn't mean that he was a bad guy. Maybe he couldn't come. So Abaye went to Rav Avir. Have a koya igran. Now Rav Avir was on the roof of the house at the time. Amar nichos mar v'neisei. So Abaye said, "Can you come down? Can we talk?" Lo nachas. He did not come down. Again, maybe he couldn't come down. Whatever. So Saluk Hulagabe. So Abaye climbed to the roof. Amar Le, so the point of the story is that Abaye is being matriach himself to try to get down to the bottom of this. Amar Le, Emle gufa deuvda hechavis. Abaye said to Rav Avir, what was the story with the needle on one side? Amar Le, mafter knisos anol le'ela merebi Rabba. I was the basically the gabbai of the shul of the yeshiva by Rabbi. Have a Rav Huna Tzipura, Rav Yosi Medah Yosh Lefanov, and Rav Huna Tzipura and Rav Yosi Medah were sitting there. And a needle, a stomach was brought where the needle was sticking out only one side. And Rebbe checked the outside, meaning Normally, if it's only one side, it's kosher. For whatever reason, Rabbi checked the outside. I don't know if maybe felt that Rabbi was chumrah. He checked the outside, and he found a spot of blood on the outside, which indicates that the needle had been piercing through and through. And that's treifa. And he said it's treifa, which, by the way, just shows you that was not the thing that Rabbi had heard. Rabbi had heard that if the needle only punctures one side, it's treif. That, and from Rav Avira, that's not where Rav Avira, that's not... Rav Avira was actually talking about a situation where there's a spot of blood on the outside, which indicates that the needle pierced through and through. Of course, if it pierced through and through, it's treifa, meaning it's no longer a chiddush. We thought we were saying a bechiddush that if it only pierced one side, it's treif. That's not what he said at all. He said if there's a spot of blood on the outside, that's indicative that it pierced them through. So Amar im ein shamakin keres dam minayin. Amar lei tarach elahu gavra. So Abaye said, I made myself crazy for this. Masisani, that's my first Mishnah. Hem says a basic question, nikavachutz. That's not no chiddush in that. Okay. So now from here until the end of the daf, we're going to be talking about the treifa, what's called nefula. Nefula is one of Alchemash Masinais, which means that if an animal falls from at least 10 tefachim high, then there's a concern that internal injuries or internal dislocations took place, and the halacha is that it's a treif. Now, one of the ways, as we'll see, you can't inspect the body because I don't know why. For whatever halacha mashmasina, within the first 24 hours, it may not be the signs of injuries may not be clear. But it's halacha mashmasina, it's treif, unless you wait 24 hours. If you wait 24 hours and the animal's fine, then you're fine. But this is the nefula is if you shecht it within 24 hours, it's a problem. Says the Gemara Rav Huna, heniach behema lamayla. Let's say instead of the animal falling off a roof, you see the animal on the roof, and you come back an hour later, and now the animal's down here. So what happened? It either fell, there's three choices. Either it fell, and it's a treifa, it jumped, and it didn't hurt itself, or it slowly shimmied down the side of the wall. I don't know, it somehow climbed down. So the halacha is, if you didn't see the animal fall, it's not a treifa. Now, I told you, it's either two possibilities, either because it jumped safely, or it climbed down safely. The Gemara will clarify. Ravina had a goat, that was on the roof, and it saw through the skylight barley. So it jumped down. Now, so the question is, it didn't walk, it jumped. Now, after it falls, he finds that that it had a hard time standing up. So it's not just like jumping and it clearly was a klopped. The only question is, the question was, is this animal treif? So I see the comment de Rav Ashi. They came in front of Rav Ashi. Now, the question was as follows. We just got finished saying that if you leave an animal on the roof and you come back and it's down, it's kosher. Why? Is the reason because we assume it didn't jump, meaning we assume it shimmied the way down, but over here, where it clearly jumped, it had nothing to rely on, that's a treifa. Perhaps no. Perhaps the reason why it's not a treifa in that case is because there's a difference between falling and jumping. Meaning when you fall and the animal doesn't expect impact, the presumption is that it can't brace itself. But in a situation where the animal jumps, even though it does, there's impact, but it braces itself. So that's the question. Is the heter where it came down without us watching because we assume it shimmied down, but had it jumped and there would be impact, it would be treifa? Perhaps no. Jumping is not the same as falling. And in this case, where it clearly jumped, it should be fine. So Amarle, Mishum Dam Nafsha, he says that there's a difference in jumping and falling. Jumping, even if it braces itself, Vahinami Am Nafsha, and therefore it's kosher in this situation. So even though it did hit the floor and it did show sign of, it's having a hard time standing up, but there's a difference between falling and jumping. Hai Imrisa, there was a certain little lamb, Dav Berav Chaviva, Dav Shavjan Kraya Besraisa, that its legs, it was dragging its hind legs. So the question is, why is it dragging its hind legs? So, Rav Yema said, it's kosher. It just has cramps. It's cramping. It's not the treif. Masker Ravina heard this, and Ravina asked the question, why are you assuming it's cramps? Maybe the spinal cord is severed and it's paralyzed. But Kua, after shechting the little lamb, they actually found that the spinal cord was severed. It says the Gemara, even though that case happened to be the spinal cord was severed, in general, if an animal is dragging its legs, it's not a sign of treifa. Why? because there's two possibilities. There's cramps or it's a spinal cord injury. Cramps are much more common. Shagrusa shchiach, a cramp is common, and therefore you're allowed to presume that it's the most common situation. Amrav Huna, Zacharim HaMenachem Zezeh. If rams, they hit their heads against each other, we're not concerned that will cause an internal injury. Meaning when an animal falls, that's a treifa. Banging their heads against each other is not. And avagab the medavi b'kaima, and even though they show signs of pain or signs of injury, simmer ba'alma, you could assume that they have a fever. Meaning, you could assume that that's just life of being a ram. They're not actually injured. Enough la'agra vadi choshen. But if it fell to the ground, meaning after headbutting, the headbutt was so hard that the animal was knocked down to the ground, then that would be a chashash. Then now we have an issue. Meaning, so what you mean is you have to wait 24 hours. Yeah. Meaning a chashash nefula, so you have to wait 24 hours. Now, says the Gemara, Amarav Menashi. Menashi says, Hani dichri deganve genovi. Let's say you have a ram that was stolen by thieves, and the thieves return, and while they're stealing it, they take the ram, they throw it over the roof, over the fence, because they're stealing it. The halacha is that throw, you could assume, does not make it a treifa. Why? Because when people steal something and they want to keep it, they don't want to injure the animal. So they obviously threw it in a more gentle way, where they dropped it on its hind legs as opposed to just hucking it. Because when they dropped it, they obviously dropped it on its legs as opposed to on their back, because they're stealing it for themselves. They obviously don't want to injure the animal. Because they also want the animal not to be injured. Forget that even if they're not religious, they don't want the animal to be injured. They want the animal to be able to run with them. But if let's say they're returning, let's say they stole it and they're returning it and they're throwing it back in to the original owners, then that's a problem, because if they're returning it, they don't care if it gets injured or not, so then they're just going to throw it, and then that's a nefula. But says the Gemara, but this is only true if they're returning it because they were caught. Let's say they steal the animal, and the guy's like, who's that? And I'm calling the cops, and they just take the ram and throw it back in. That's a problem of nefula. You have to wait 24 hours. But if they're returning it because of tshuva, then the presumption is that a person does tshuva in the proper way. You're not going to injure the animal doing tshuva. Obviously, when you threw it in a softer way. If you took a stick and you hit it on the head of the animal, that's not going to cause nefula. The concern would be if you hit the spinal cord. That's more of a concern. The heads are very strong. They're not going to get injured. If you hit the head and the stick also hit the tail, so it was sort of didn't hit the spine straight up, then it's not a treifa, it's not a nefula. Or if you hit the tail and it went to the head, but again, not on the spinal cord. Or if you hit the spinal cord but evenly. It's not like you hit in the middle, you hit straight across the entire thing. That's not going to make a nefula. It says the Gemara, but if the stick, let's say you hit it in the back, but you only hit half of the back, so it came to a point in the middle. So let's say this is the back, and it only hit half of it. Then that causes, because it's not equally distributed amongst the spine, that can cause a spinal injury. The isbe kitre, and let's say even if it's evenly distributed, but the stick is not just a flat stick; it's got like knobs in it. Then the concern is the knobs might have done specific damage to parts of the spine, and then chayshin on that makes it a nefula. You have to wait 24 hours. Similarly, if you don't hit the spine across the length of the spine, you hit it width. So just across the back, not much like across the back, in the middle of the back, then that's for sure going to make a nefula, and you have to wait 24 hours. When an animal gives birth, the squeezing through the birth canal does not make the animal nefula. That meaning, nefula means traumatic experiences. When the animal gives birth, that's also a traumatic experience. It's being squeezed and pushed out. That does not make a nefula. Now, what that means is that within the first 24 hours of an animal's birth, you could eat the animal. The question is, it's obvious, of course. You think every single time the animal gives birth, it's a nefula, it's a pel. So the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to clarify, and the Rishonim speak this out, it's going to be clear from the Gemara. We're talking about a case where after it gives birth, it's having a hard time standing up. It can't stand up. So it's not just giving birth. It gave birth and it can't stand up. Still, that's not a sign of nefula. Maybe it's just a slower development. The Gemara now is going to try to bring proofs to Rabbi Nachman that within the first 24 hours of an animal giving birth, it does not have the status of nefula. I'll prove it to you. What's the proof? Let's bring a proof from a human baby. If a baby gives birth, the same way you're saying that an animal giving birth, it's not considered nefula, it's not considered a traumatic experience. So too, if a baby is given birth, it's also not considered a traumatic experience. In what capacity? So this is related to the laws of ziva. Hold on one second. Hold on. Someone ate on my desk. There is crumbs everywhere. Anyway, sorry. Go to the next page. So the halacha is that if you have a baby that's 1 day old, metama b'ziva, it's possible that if the baby shows sign of a ziva, which is zera coming out, but not through a kishrei aver, which obviously it's not normal to have a baby, but it's possible. The point is it's possible. Now, that means that if a baby, the day old, gives off a sign of a ziva, let's say twice, it's now a tameh as a zav. Now let me ask you a question. One of the rules of a zav is that if it becomes due to injury, it's not considered a ziva. It might be an illness, but not an injury. When I say an illness, I mean it's not a normal thing to do, but it's not due to injury. If there was a trauma that the body went through, and because of that there was a ziva, then it's not a zav. So you just got finished telling me that a day-old baby can conceptually become a zav. That shows you, obviously, that the birth is not traumatic. Because if the birth was traumatic, then why not just say it's not a zav? Because, and the zav is probably, the zera is probably due to the trauma of giving birth. Because if you actually say that giving birth is a traumatic experience, then then it shouldn't be a zav. So how? So it's a riot to Rabbi Nachman, because the Mishnah says that it's possible to be a zav within the first day of birth. That's a riot to Rabbi Nachman that giving birth, that being born is not traumatic, because if it was taka traumatic, then you wouldn't be a zav. So it says the Gemara, no, it could be Rabbi Nachman's wrong. It could be generally giving birth is traumatic. So how over here is it a zav? We're talking about a cesarean section, where it didn't go through the trauma of being pushed through the birth canal. But maybe if a taka was born in a normal way, maybe it is a traumatic experience. The Gemara says another riot, Tashema. The halacha is that if a baby is born, an animal is born on Yom Tov, you can shecht it on Yom Tov. Now it has to do with the relations of the relative to the laws of muksa. The point is you can shecht it that day. But if every baby that gives birth is a sign of a nefula, then you should have to wait 24 hours. So the Gemara says, it's an easy out. This is talking about a case where it was born cesarean section, meaning maybe taka, if it was born healthy, you can't shecht it within 24 hours because of the traumatic experience of going through the birth canal. Over here we're talking about where it was cesarean section. Says the Gemara Tashema, okay, we'll bring a raya that you could shecht an animal the first day it's born. So you say, that's maybe it went through cesarean section. But over here, it's talking about a bechar that's born, and instantly you see that it has a mum. Right away, the halach is you could shecht it that day. Now so what are you going to say? So obviously you see that you can eat it that day. So it shows you it's not an afula within the first 24 hours. And don't tell me that it's dafka talking about cesarean section, because it can't be. Because if it was going through cesarean section, it doesn't have the status of a bechar for kedusha. The whole point is that it's a bechar, but it has a mum. So it's not brought as a carbon, it has kedusha, but you're able to eat it. And if you tell me cesarean section, it doesn't have the din of a bechar. Din of bechar is only if it's born through the normal womb. So it must be that it's born through the normal way, and you're able to eat it that day, and it does not have the status of nefula. So it's a raya that the first 24 hours is not a nefula. Tashema v'shavin shemnoilehu muma ima shezemen amuchan. V'chite machanam sheyatz derech daifin. If you tell me it's talking about cesarean section, derech daifin mikdash, but it doesn't have kedusha when it's born through a C-section. V'amar Rav Yechon amayda Rav Shimon leinin kaddish she'ena kaddish. So that it must be born regular, and you're able to eat it. So it shows you that it does not have the din of nefula. It's a raya to Rabbi Nachman. So the Gemara says no. I mentioned before, when Rabbi Nachman says that the first 24 hours you don't have the status of nefula, he's not talking about the average baby. The average baby, of course, the average baby animal, of course, is not nefula. It's talking about a case where the animal can't stand. So maybe that brisa that says that you're able to eat a bechar the first day is talking about the bechar is walking around healthy. If the bechar takas have a hard time standing up, maybe it does have a status of nefula. Over there, it's talking about a bechar that's walking around healthy. So it's not a raya. Okay, normally we said that if an animal falls down or is shoved down, it's a sign of a nefula. It says the Gemara Amar Rav Nachman Beis Hamat Bachim Ein B'Misharusa Gevarim. When an animal is about to be shechted, nowadays they have machinery, but often they would take the animal and sort of wrestle it to the ground. The halacha is the wrestling it to the ground is not making it a nefula. Why? Because the Gemara is going to explain, the animal senses that it's going to be pulled down, it sees the struggle, and it sort of braces itself for the fall, as opposed to an unexpected fall. The Gemara says, "Hu tura de nafal v'shtamik kal negechuse." There was a certain ox that the shaychet knocked it over to the ground before shechting it, and it was groaning. It was like making a lot of noise. Or Rav Yisrael bar Shmuel bar Marta shakom shufri shufri. Rav Yisrael bar Marta ate it, bought some of the meat and ate it. And meaning it's not a treifa. The Rabbanan said, how do you know that it's not a treifa? It was shoved down to the ground. It holds its hooves into the ground until it's on the floor. In other words, it braces itself, as opposed to nefula, where it's an unexpected fall. Now, we said that a nefula doesn't mean it's automatically treif. It means you have to wait 24 hours. Now, says the Gemara, Amrav Yehuda Merav, there are other situations. Let's say you didn't wait 24 hours, but Amda, after the animal fell, it stood up. The halacha is, you don't have to wait 24 hours. If the animal stood, you could check it right away. But, bedika v'adaboy, but you have to do bedika. As we'll see in a moment, this means, bedika normally is like checking the lungs for sirchas. That's not what we're talking about. It means you have to check the internal organs. We'll see, check the belly, check the rib cage. You have to do bedika. You don't have to wait 24 hours because it stood up, but you have to do bedika. But holcha, if after standing it walked, and it's tzricha bedika. Once it walks, it's a completely healthy animal. You don't have to wait 24 hours. You don't have to do bedika. It's a regular animal, which is average animal. You don't have to check the internal organs for ruptures. Rechia Barashi Amar no says achazu v'achazu tzricha bedika. Both whether it stood or walked, you don't have to wait 24 hours, but you have to do a bedika. Amar Rav Yirmeh Baracha Amar Rav Pashta Yada. Rav Yirmeh Baracha says you don't even have to stand up. Merely stretching out its hand la'amoy to stand apish le'avda, even if it doesn't end up standing, then it's the same as standing. And akar ragla, and merely raising its leg in an attempt to walk after it's standing, even if it doesn't walk, it's akin to stand. It's akin to walking. So those halachas apply even if it doesn't actively stand or walk. Merely beginning the process of standing or walking is the same thing. Rav Chizda Amar, even more lenient view, niatzor la'amid apish le'amda. It doesn't even have to stick its leg out to stand up. Merely getting itself, like moving its body in order to stand, is enough. How do we paskin? If an animal fell unintentionally from a roof and it did not see it coming, and it stands, and it doesn't walk, you don't have to wait 24 hours, but you do bedika. But if after standing it starts to walk, it doesn't even need bedika. Now, what is bedika? You have to check the stomach. Check the stomach, make sure it's not ruptured. All you have to do is check the stomach. No, you don't have to just check the stomach. You have to check the rib cage. You have to check the chest. You have to check the entire inner cavity to make sure there's nothing ruptured. Do you also have to check the esophagus and the trachea to make sure they're not dislocated? No, it's very hard to dislocate a trachea and esophagus. The concern is the stomach being ruptured or the spine being severed. The esophagus and trachea is not a concern. Now, the same way you could have an afula by an animal, you could also have an afula by a bird. And by a bird, it's even easier because they're more delicate animals. So the Gemara says, Amrav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Oif shenechbar al pnei hamayim. Let's say a bird was thrown into the water, either by another animal, by a wind, I don't know, a person, whatever it is. The bird is thrown over into the water. So the halach is it's an afula. But it could show signs, the same way an animal can walk or could stand, and that would sort of remove the status of nefula. Kivan sheshat malay kamase, if the bird were to swim its body length, daya, that's enough that it's no longer a nefula. Now, it has to swim though. Now, how do you know that it's not just being dragged down the stream? So, this is talking about it's swimming upstream, so it's clearly using its force to propel itself. But if it just goes downstream, then that's the current, that's not the animal. But it says the Gemara, and if the water is stagnant, then it doesn't matter upstream, downstream, it doesn't make a difference. It's a sign that it's no longer nefula. But if, let's say there's wood, let's say it's going downstream, so we said that's just a stream, but you see that it's swimming because there's wood, like little chips of wood, and it's going faster than the wood, so it's obviously a sign that it's swimming downstream, then hakadme, then obviously it's a sign that it's swimming and it's not a nefula. Now the Gemara will just list different materials that if it bangs into, would it be a nefula or not? Again, the main thing is how hard is that material. Glima matis, if it hit a sheet that was very taut, so a very taut sheets are soft, but when they're very very tight, that becomes like a very tight, like bounces off it. Then cheshina. Deloy matis, but if it's not very tight, it's not very taut, loy cheshina, then it's not a nefula. Oif umuufif loy cheshina. And if let's say the sheet was folded, even if it looks like it was taut, folded sheets can't be that taut, it's not going to be a problem. Isla umekarvi kitri chashinan. If let's say there was a net and it has knots, so even though it's not very taut, but the knots themselves can cause damage. Loy mekarvi kitri, but if the knots are not close together, so it's just a net, but it's not very taut, and there's not like a layer of knots, loy chashinan. Kisni de ovid betuni. If let's say there was flax that were in bundles, chashinan, flax in bundles are hard and it could cause damage. But the high geese chashinan. But let's say it didn't hit the top of the flax, it hit the sides are softer. Not a nefula. Asuraisi, bundles of reeds, chashinan, that will cause a nefula. But kisna, if let's say it fell into flax, the daik that was beaten, v'nafitz and combed, chashinan, that's softer. Daik v'loy nafitz, if it was pounded but not combed, chashinan, that's hard and it'll cause a nefula. The ovid bizri, if the flax was then made into bundles after being combed and beaten, kivan it could be kitri, since it has it's twisted. Apparently they had to twist it together to make the bundles. Chashina, that could the twisting bundles are hard and it could cause damage. Doksa, apparently after you clean the waste materials of flax, there's what's called doksa, and there's called daktasa. Doksa is harder. Therefore, it's going to be a problem. Daktasa, which is a softer, then it's loy chashinan. If it falls into that, it's not going to be a problem, or bangs into it, whatever. Navra is a palm tree. It has sometimes those shell of the palm tree on the floor. It's very hard. If it bangs into that, then chashinan. Timchasa, but if it's the softer part of the inside of the palm tree, loy chashinan. Kitma nila, if it fell on sifted ash, chashinan. If it fell into sifted ash, then that's a hard material and it could cause damage. But loy nila, but if it's not sifted, that's apparently softer, loy chashina. Chol hadak, fine sand, loy chashina, that's soft. Chol hagas, but coarse sand, chashina, that's a problem. Avak drachim, dust, like thick dust, chashina, that's a problem. Tivna va'avid bazga, straw that was made into a bale of hay, chashina, that's a problem, it's very hard. Loy avid bazga, but just straw that's on the floor, but not into a bale. Loy chashina, that's not hard enough to cause a nefula. Chiti dechol minayu, all forms of wheat is chashina. Sa'ari dechol minayu loy chashina, but barley does not cause a problem. It's apparently softer. Kol mi nekitnius emesham risa gevarim. All types of beans and peas do not cause a problem, as we'll see, because they're not very firm. So if you bang into them, they'll sort of glide. They'll move around the spine. Labaim and Ruvia, except for fenugreek, chimtzi ein by mishum risa gevarim. Peas don't cause a problem, but chefzi, chickpeas, which are tougher and go to a point on top, yesh mishum risa gevarim. Cloud in the middle, this is the rule. Call midi de mishrik ein mishum risa gevarim. Anything that slips and slides when you press into it, it's not going to cause a nefula because it'll slide, make room for the spine. But if it does not slip and slide when you press, then it causes a nefula. Just to finish up, davuk. Let's say a bird was caught on a glue board, and it fell with the glue board and hit the ground. So the question is, did it brace itself? So Ravashi Yam Shari Amemer Os. It's Machlekes Ravashi and Amemer. So the Gemara clarifies. Bichad Gapa, if it was only one wing was caught on the glue, but the other wing is free, then it's for sure not a problem, because as it's falling, the other wing is going to flap and it'll brace its fall. Ki pligi betray Gapi. The Machlekes is where both wings are caught on the glue board. Manda Asar Amalach Heichinekim. So the other one who says it's Asar, he says it's trefa, because how could it brace itself? It's completely caught on the glue board. Manda Shari, but the one who's Mater, Amalach Efsher, the Nikim Ma'ikve de Gapi. Even though the wings are caught on the glue board, but the elbows, so to speak, is not. So maybe it braces itself on the elbows. Ikad Amri, and some say no. Betray Gapi Kuliyamla Pligi Asar. If both wings are caught on the glue board, everyone agrees it's a problem because it can't brace itself. Ki pligi bechad gapa. The machlokes is where only one wing is caught. The one who says that it's not a treifa says that it could brace itself with the other wing by flapping. And the one who's meimar who says it's aser, because one wing is already caught, the other wing cannot use enough force to actually brace itself. What's the halacha? If it falls when both wings are glued to the glue board, then it's aser. But one wing is not going to be causing a treifa.